Welcome back to the Blind Spot. Today I have with me a really fun guest. For those of you who don't know, the famous Brian Herr. I would like to introduce everyone to my friend, mentor, Brian Herr, who is the co-founder of Starting Blocks. Brian, I'll hand it over to you to do a quick intro.
Oh, thanks, Jason. As Jason mentioned, we've known each other a long time. And when you've been doing this as long as I have, you get introduced to people that you just want to keep working with over and over again. And Jason's one of those guys. And when we get together to talk tech, hold on to your hat. It's about to get crazy.
I appreciate that. So look, we have a really fun topic today, and the topic is really around what it takes to manage a cyber program in 2026. And I have to stress 2026 because the last 18 months have been a doozy in almost every industry. And I feel like there's a fundamental shift that's happening in what a well run program means versus what basic cyber hygiene has meant and how that's evolved. So, you know, in your experience, you run and manage and advise security across a number of companies in your portfolio all at once. And in 2026, in your mind, what separates a program that's actually being managed from one that just looks busy?
The biggest thing is, with all the clients and the portfolio companies I'm working with, I'm spending a lot more time on the board side as well. So not only am I presenting to the board, but for other companies, I'm on the board as a advisor. And what's evolving is cybersecurity is becoming part of how do we do business in a secure way or a secure and compliant way, depending on what roles. And the leaders aren't as interested in the brass tacks. They're looking at it as, hey, the technology and security leaders should be addressing this. What needs to be boiling up is things that affect what I call the five core pillars. How are you protecting and uh, helping to grow existing money or contracts? How are you protecting new revenue and sales? How are you protecting people and community? This
Hmm.
gets into a little bit of the data privacy side. The next piece is how are you handling protecting the company and its operations, scale, and efficiency? And then the last one is how are you handling regulatory and contractual risk? Those levers always show up in board meetings. So those that are successful in talking to the board and getting funding and showing that a program is running is relating to those five levers. And that's what's
Okay.
being expected. And now what really throws a curveball in there is everyone's pushing for more automation, AI augmentation, technology enablement, scale. So, historically, security's always been the brakes on the bus. Well, now the mantra for a successful program is how do we do it in a secure, enabled way?
Hmm.
So we're seeing, I'm seeing successful programs now getting on board with we're being more embedded in all parts of the business. We're giving advice. We're finding ways to do it in a secure way. And we're looking at it from a risk perspective because that's what the board wants to hear is how are we addressing it? And if there's risks, how are we addressing the risks? So you're seeing more of it around how do you do detection and response? How do you do recovery? Because if you spend all of your time on the protection side, it drones people out. But that's what they're used to in a business program because nothing's
Yeah.
perfect.
So do you believe that recovery is I guess when you're ranking your five pillars, right? Do you think recovery is the thing that boards care about the most because downtime's inevitable, or what's your thought? What's the one thing out of your five pillars that the board would care about the most?
It actually depends on the company and their industry.
Yeah.
Like when I'm
Okay.
talking to healthcare, people and
Mhm.
community sits at the top.
Of
And
course.
then
Yeah.
operational and everything, because that's all life safety. That's
Hmm.
all. Whereas you get into technology, they still care about the people, but the people impact isn't as great. Now it's more about, if they're in the services side, like a SaaS, It's
Hmm.
protecting existing money, new money, and availability. Those, depending on what day it is, those three vie for number one. You get into the regulated spaces, the ability to get new contracts and regulatory contractual obligations, those levers sit towards the top because you can literally kill a company by getting blackballed in like the defense industry.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, so really, like a well managed program framed around your five pillars are um, well entirely dependent on what the company's goals are, right? So you talked
Hmm.
about communicating to the board. You talked about framing what's most important to the actual business. And I think that's really the root of what, I guess, in my opinion, the root of what a well managed program looks like in 2026. And it sounds like it hasn't really changed. It's just the tools and the inputs that you can use to still communicate to the board are relatively the same. Would you agree with that or no?
Yes, what has changed and is actually a difficult problem to solve is, you and I have been around long enough. We remember the scramble to the cloud where everyone put everything up there. It got expensive fast. You don't know where
Yeah.
things were. It was just a mess.
Yeah.
We're seeing the same thing with the rush to AI. And, we've got people like, "Oh, I can replace all of my people." Nah, no, you're the pendulum's got to swing back. It's going to be about augmentation, business automation, but there's two distinct problems. And just like when someone says cloud, it's like to all of us that actually understand what's under the hood, there's a lot to it. Are we
Mhm.
talking SaaS, Pat? Like there's all these different pieces. That umbrella is just huge. Same thing with AI. So are we breaking it down into, language models at the enterprise and customer service app layer? Or are we talking about augmentation and automation at the user and data layer, closer to the users,
Yeah.
internals? This is your coders, your marketing teams, people doing business automation for tasks, similar but different.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it's really crazy. It's on the security front. We're supposed to be able to insert protection, governance. I'm seeing where the security teams are getting brought in because we're used to doing governance and
Hmm.
helping setting up cost governance, use governance. We're taking on more of that advisor role in the more mature programs because the IT teams are like, hey, you guys are better at this, and people don't always like you anyway. Can you just take one for the team? It's like, yeah, we can do that.
I could probably have an entire episode on that whole dynamic. Matter of fact,
Hmm.
I might. Okay. So you said something interesting. So let me frame it as where do you see a mature or a well run program in 2026 versus a struggling one, right? So kind of answer the opposite. Where do you see an organization that's struggling now, and how would they get to a point where it's well run and more governed in 2026?
So it's really funny when I jump into a new program. The first thing I do is I sit down, interview the technology leader, the CFO, and the CEO, and I ask them what are the most important processes and services that we would deliver. And it's funny, the answers don't always line up. And then I walk through like what is catastrophic in your mind? What is a high impact, a medium impact? What's low but just annoyance? And some of it, sometimes I ask in dollars, sometimes I ask just for what does impact feel like? You get a lot of insights there. And then you can walk into, once you understand what those critical things are, they're usually apps and business processes. Then I start the process of, listen, we're going to do an incident response and recovery workshop. Like the whole place is gone. How do we build it back?
Hmm.
And what's
Yeah.
really
Okay.
interesting, it's based on business processes. I don't care about
Yep.
the technology. I create
Yep.
a dependency tree and basically I pull apart everything. What do you have protecting it? What are you doing for detection? What do you have for response and recovery? Pull the whole thing apart. And then I say, okay, Now that I understand all the pieces and the dependencies, I know how to speak to the CIO about, because he's looking at it from
Mhm.
this side. The
Right.
CFO looks at it this way. The CEO looks this way. And then when I frame the program, it starts with what does the business care about? And are we putting the right protection, detection, response, and recovery around that process? And that's what I start reporting on. And then I add reporting over time. Every board loves that because at the end of the day, they're running a business. They don't care about bits, bytes, wires. None of that matters. Except for there's always like one person on the board that's former techie, but pull them
Yeah,
aside.
yeah. Yeah, that'd be like me going to a board. I'm probably gonna ask the tech questions, you know?
Mhm.
Uh,
But when you pull that apart, you start to put in and let the board know, like, you're gonna be evolving the reporting over time, and almost infallibly, I have to start pushing out the more techie things because usually the board's getting, like, a Nessus report. I'm like, "They're these are money people. What do they care?" What they care about is, are we doing our jobs? And you do have to give a little bit of receipts because it makes them feel good, and I give high-level dashboards, usually in an appendix. But the idea is they want to know that someone understands the business, knows how to protect the business, and then when things go horribly awry, has already gone through the entire plan of how to detect, respond, and ultimately recover in a satisfactory amount of time. That confidence is what they want in a program. The rest is fluff.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I had in a previous episode, I had a guest, where I asked him, you know, you go into a board meeting, what's your maximum number of slides, right? I've been the person that put all the SOC dashboards in a slide and sent it to the board, and then I wondered why they never approved my project. I know you remember those days. So you know, I had asked them, you know, what is the optimal number of slides? So, or the number of reports that you would send up to a board. I'm curious, what's your answer on that now these days?
2 to 3.
All right, all right. It seems to be a universal number now. Okay, good.
Basically, it's overall status of the program. The next one is a little bit more, here's the things that are in flight. Here's a little bit of reporting on, month to date or year to date. And the last one's a little more practical and tactical. And usually has like, here's what's performing. Here's where we're spending money. Here's a percent of money allocation. Here's the risk areas we're allocating money to. Here's
Hmm.
some of the stats. And then usually I'll put one of those cool kid receipts in the appendix because there's always someone that asks. And it has things like time to response, time to remediation, cover it. Just has a kind of like that SOC dashboard, and it has all of those pieces in there. And then I give it kind of an overall risk score. Like, this is where we're at. This is where we should be. There's some tools out there that can help with it. You and I have talked about a few of those,
Yeah,
but they want to see some receipts for the money spent and the time and effort. And I always give a, what status are we to recover? And I have a little piece in there, like, here's the 3 or 4 most critical business processes. What are we looking at? And all you have to do is show in one of the slides there, like, hey, this business process, we've discovered a deficiency that we don't think we can sufficiently protect it. And, here's some of the idea of what it could look like. I also do a regular where I kind of come up with a best case to worst case scenario spread
hmm,
of what impact looks like, and then I take that against insurance. Because remember, at the end of the day, everyone there is pretty much a money manager,
yeah,
and
yeah,
infallibly, they'll ask, like, "How do we reduce this?" Well, here's the areas that we are currently working on that will reduce it, or here's areas we're seeking funding to address these specific pillars. It's just a money decision. Do I run and, do I take the risk, or do we spend the money? Because ultimately, I'm spending the money somewhere. Is it
yeah. Right.
R&D? Is it more insurance? That's the decision they want. They want
Ooh,
very
the that insurance conversation, that can also be a deep one. Um, okay. So
every company. So on the insurance side, every company I go into, I end up having to redo their insurance.
yeah.
It's
Actually,
never
well,
right.
hold on. Let's go into that one. Because I know we field a lot of questions here around. insurance and premiums and things like that. What's your take on like cyber insurance premiums for like a well-run program at this point?
We're starting to see where the better carriers are actually have good questionnaires and they're adjusting based on how well your program is run. I've seen organizations because one of the worst things that can happen is if you have an incident and you have a breach, getting insurance back after the fact is a completely different process, right? You
Huh.
you have to kind of it's tough and expensive. For me, I work with a partner. They're called Yukon, so they're basically a marketplace for cyber insurance,
Hmm.
and then they do a full like I jokingly say the 42-point inspection. But they but when you work as many cases as I have, you've learned where the gaps are in insurance. They've also done it. They have a full list. And it's like, oh, here's the areas you didn't think of because there's some things that people think come under cyber. It doesn't. It comes under a different part of insurance. They know this. So I send everyone over. We do the and we run through it. And then I bring to the table like, hey, I've already talked to the business leaders. What does catastrophic down look like? So I have an idea of what their risk tolerance is. Plus, here's the records and uptime and all that stuff. We can now turn that into an actual concise proposal for insurance. And
Yeah,
then what coverage should you have based on reality, not this sounds fine.
yeah. Do you see a
That's
lot of
important.
organizations just like randomly buying insurance, thinking they're covered, and then when an incident happens, they're screwed? Or like, what does that
Oh,
look
yeah.
like? Yeah,
That happens quite a bit. That's part of when you run a program, you have to address the risk side, which means you have to understand the P&L and insurance, right?
yep,
You have to understand all
yep.
three slices. That's probably one of the hottest topics when I'm working with a newer CISO. It's like if you've never run a business, it's going to be a bit of a culture shock, right? Look at where you're at now.
Yeah.
Now that you've run departments, you've run businesses, the way
Mm.
you look at cybersecurity and risk is different because you've had to pay the bills.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, 15 years ago, all I cared about was firewalls and all this other stuff. But now that's such a small piece of the pie. It's kind of that's just a tool that solves a problem. It doesn't address the entire thing. So yeah, that's funny. So actually, man, that would go off into two different conversations. So we have you have the program coverage and the business side, and for our more technical listeners, I'm going to shift topics just a little bit. For our more technical listeners, I'm guessing you see a lot of tool stacks at this point, right?
Oh yeah.
What's the if you were to say what's the I'm going to challenge you. What's the one tool that every well-run program actually uses? Doesn't have to be like a name tool, or what's the domain in which the tool operates? Just one. I'm gonna challenge you on just one. What's the one that gives you the best bang for the buck these days?
Data collection and telemetry.
Okay, all right. Now,
Now
what's the
everyone's
expensive shelfware that nobody touches these days?
oh goodness.
So I was gonna
Oh,
challenge you.
that one is tough. It depends on the industry. I think it's not necessarily that there's shelfware. It's more of one of the first things I do when I come into an existing shop is I get an inventory of what they buy, and then I figure out what it does because usually people are using like 10%, and then they have like 40 to 60% overlap with another tool, and then another tool, and another tool, and then you've got integrations and people. And the one thing that I tell people is cybersecurity doesn't have to be expensive. But if it's not going to be expensive, it has to be well thought out.
Right.
And what are the things that you should be doing in house? So this is the practical, tactical piece. It's it comes down to what do I have to protect? So we talked about those things. What's the right platform to allow me to protect it? How do I handle detection that natively works with all of that? I couldn't tell you how
Yep.
many times it's like, oh yeah, we have an MDR company. Great. Do they work with all of your tools? No, no, no. We still have to then you chose poorly. It all needs to so when I do a program, start with the tools up front, have to work with the MDR, has to work with the IR team, has to work with insurance, has to work with recovery, forensics. Everything's planned out. They all talk to each other. They all integrate. Those companies have worked together before. And then I find a partner that can get me a sweetheart deal on all of it. And then everything else starts to migrate out. I have taken companies where we've saved almost 50% on their spend by doing that and significantly increased their their coverage. They knocked the time to response down to minutes, and the leftover money ultimately you're able to turn towards investigating and deploying more desk side security around AI agents and tools, the SaaS side, and also investigating and starting to deploy more tools and compliance governance tools towards the enterprise and customer service apps in the I space because no one had budget for it. So by being more efficient, I opened up budget to address the things that people have left on the table, which it's such a wild west is actually more exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. I had a conversation with a mutual acquaintance of ours, and at previous companies, they, after I left, or the next person took over, they would reach out to me after, and they'd say, "Hey, on the renewal, how did you get the price down where it was?" And I kind of chuckled because that is something in like 2013, 2014, 2015 that I learned from you. So that's why I kind of had to laugh when you said get the best bang for your buck and drive the vendors down, like because you know what you need to spend, and if you have dollars are finite, so you know um, just push harder on the vendors. They want to put a product in there and get the best bang for your buck out of it, right? I typically only go for vendors that can solve or help me mature in multiple domains to get the best
Hmm.
bang for the buck. And I don't need the
Exactly.
leader in every domain, right? I think um, a lot of CISOs or a lot of tactical leaders tend to look at Gartner, G2, Forrester, whatever it is, and they buy the best of breed tool. Um, and that's how they get an expensive program really fast, right? Doesn't necessarily mean your protection's better. You now have an expensive program and like you said earlier, cyber doesn't have to be expensive. That basic cyber hygiene can be solved with even open source stuff. You just want to give it maybe better processes and people around it, right? If there's deficiencies in the softwares, so many ways to solve this stuff. So, um, yeah, I kind of got a kick out of that when we talked about the budget part.
Exactly. Well, and it really, if you're part of the business, that's being part of the business. So I always tell people, like, if you're going to get into the executive leadership, even if you go do it on your own dime, go take a business accounting course and budget
Yep.
course
Yep.
because when you speak money, you speak the love language of the board and the CFO, and you understand the pressures that they're under and how they operate, it is so much easier to make your case in a way that they can understand, comprehend. And then from there, you can back into how do I pay for this out of my budget? Or is it a mutual budget or mutual benefit to multiple departments? Because sometimes a security tool is a security tool just because that's who paid for it,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's a great point. Like identity, I've seen that one
Hmm.
because it touches everyone. That if you get friends in the org on board with that, oh yeah, now that's a huge point. I think that actually might be one of the most understated points in relation to tech stacks, right? That we've talked about so far. So
When you
that's
get that
interesting.
that buy-in, and I joked, in our past life, there was a point where the product was going to be expensive, but
Hmm.
compliance, security, and IT ops all agreed that we needed it.
Hmm.
Budget appeared. Everyone
Yeah.
contributed a portion out of their budget. We made it work, but also the hard part is getting new things in. When security pushes it, it has a certain stigma. But
Yeah.
if it comes from a different group or multiple groups, they're saying, yes, we understand. We all need this to work.
Hmm.
It's a little easier to get the adoption. And also, it's easier to report to the board how you're spending the money efficiently because it's spend once, use many.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in regards to like well-run programs, so kind of covered the tech stack, we covered what the board looks like and all of that. I want to kind of shift the viewpoint from the program up level to C-suite and boards more towards the team. So with AI absorbing more of the grunt work, right? And I'm going to air quote that because we're starting to see a reversal in some of these cases. Um, but so far, I'll say as of the moment this episode releases, so far the trend is AI is absorbing more of the grunt work. What should a human on the security team spend their time on this year that maybe they weren't 2 years ago that will contribute to the maturity of the program?
One of the biggest things that you're going to see is with more automation and augmentation, some of those low level tasks that people typically would learn on are being done by systems. So we need the new people to be able to come in at almost like a tier two to start, right? They have to understand and this is what's becoming more difficult. And when I'm talking to people about it, one, the education has to catch up. The issue I have is the colleges absolutely aren't. But what I am seeing is the community is. So a lot of people join, various Slack channels, and there's a whole security industry underground where you can get open source or very inexpensive training that's real world hands on. Like I have a student friend and he came to me and he's like, this is what I'm learning in school. I said, that's great. That would never get you hired with any of my teams. And he just like, well, is college worth it? I said, yes, for various reasons. What I would tell you is in college, take the business courses so that you can speak to, if you want to become a CISO one day, take the business courses. Yeah, take some cybersecurity so you have it on there, but take the business courses. For the hands-on, go to the industry. Go to, hackable, damn hackable, whatever. Go to the channels, go learn from people, and then go volunteer. I had one gentleman, he's like, "I don't have any experience." I said, "What do you do for fun?" "Oh, I handle cybersecurity and networking for my church." "Talk me through it."
Yeah, yeah.
Right? "How did so I do this, do this?" Like, "How did you handle this in the firewall?" He had all the concepts. Then we started to talk about nitty-gritty, and I said, "So you have hands-on. You passed the dungeon gate, you may go to the next level." And he's but that's the reality of it is people have come to me, it's like, "Oh, I have a master's in cybersecurity." I said, "Great, I'll ask a few questions." I said, "The old CISO is running circles around you on tech. That's gonna be hard." And I humbled them a little bit saying, "Here's the tactical things you need to learn. They're all available on the internet. Here's some great spots to go do it. Do
Hmm.
that and then come back to me."
Yeah. Yeah. I point a lot of people to YouTube University. Like
Mhm.
at these days, everything is free, and you and I actually we had the similar paths where we went from very tactical, technical careers and shifted, more towards that speaking towards the business. I went for my MBA, 5 6 years ago, and it helped me translate what I needed to up level to start making the program move. And that's how I made the jump to, being a CISO myself. So that's great feedback. And I love the idea that even learning doesn't even have to be expensive these days. You don't have to have crazy infrastructure at home. Although I will always advocate for a good lab. Just I will always do that. But yeah, that's good. So for the technical listeners, right, there are free open source communities you can join: Substack, Discord. I even see TikTok channels that are strictly focused on giving out as much free information as possible. So that's good feedback.
Well,
Now,
on that front, before we dive off, since we're helping people out, the other thing is go introduce yourself to people.
mhm,
I have been at events where I'm, speaking events or in-person events, online events, and I've had people come ask me questions afterward. Most people are just they think that somehow we're different. We're not. We're just farther in our career than you. And we're more than happy to share how we got here. But you have to be you have to have enough gumption to ask. And I've had a few of those people ask. They've kind of kept in touch with me. They showed me what they were doing. And then they said, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you know anyone?" It's like, yeah, you have initiative. You've proven you know what you're talking about. I will refer you to someone, and that will cut through every bit of this AI filtering nonsense that's out there, because I've seen amazing people that can't get in the door, but it's because of all this weird filtering. But on the same note, it's like, I know you, I've talked to you, you seem like a genuinely good person. You want to learn, you have the brass tacks to start. Let me give you some association to someone, and
Yep.
let's give you a warm handoff. That's how you're
Yep.
getting in. Just
Yeah.
go be a genuine good human being, and people
Yep.
will reciprocate.
Yeah. 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 I know we got away from like what's a good program in 2026, but I think people who are listening, that is going to be a huge topic. The networking and then just being a good person, that that goes farther than you pulling out the next certification that you got, right? Than anything else. So I actually love the people that reach out on LinkedIn and they're just like, hey, I want to be a part of your network. Can we set up a call? It might take me a week or two because my calendar gets a little crazy, but I will absolutely have that call with you. And that's turned into jobs for people, you know, that weren't expecting it, right? Like you're part of my network. You've kind of proven yourself. I like the go getters. You show me you're that, I can teach you anything, right? Or I can point you in the direction where you can teach yourself. So I think
And
that's great feedback.
the programs in 2026,
Hmm.
we're looking for those people, because what's evolving is the people that could only scrape by, they're going to have a hard time. The people that are adaptable, willing to learn, that are easier to work with. In other words, I want to work with you, share what we're doing, because your program's success is about the people. The tech
Ooh. Hmm.
changes, the
Hmm.
company changes.
Yep.
It's the people that you keep and maintain, that you work with. So that's the other thing I would tell you is, we're going to see some hard decisions for the next 18 months to 2 years, where people that are not able to adapt to the new reality of AI augmented processes and businesses and technology, or
Hmm.
how their job is related to that, they're going to be seen as basically moving themselves out of their niche, or maybe to a different role. And the people that are adaptable and that people want to work with, because now people are getting a lot of noise out there that's generated by AI. So genuine human communication is going to be prized. That's the You're going to see teams shrink and become much more efficient. So the
Hmm.
people that you want are the right people you want to work with.
Yeah. So I guess along that thread, like how do you keep team members sharp and not burnt out when the threats and the tooling are moving quite literally overnight? Like I think I woke up today and saw some stuff on LinkedIn where I'm just like, all right, gotta relearn this, right? So how do you keep them sharp and motivated and not burnt out?
I wish I had a golden answer. I listen, I've run programs. I've had people burn out despite my best efforts. I've burned out despite my best efforts. So no one's perfect, but you have to accept that everyone can burn out, and sometimes you will have to step in with a little bit of tough love and say, you need some time off. So you're gonna have to step forward, maybe force some people to take some time off, like
Yep.
real time off, and
Yep.
plan for it. There's nothing worse than someone goes to take time off because they need it, and they come back and it's worse than when they left.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
the other
something that I actually had learned from you a long time ago was like forcing the time off. Remember how we used to look at calendars and we'd say, hey, when's the last time you took a day off? And if their answer, I remember something you had taught me a long time ago, is if their answer was, well, I can't take it off because this thing will fail. As a leader, that tells me, I either have to cross train, right? Like this person is under stress, that sort of thing. So I love the fact you mentioned that. And I think managing people in the world of AI is starting to cause problems, right? And I do
Mhm.
see leaders misusing their people, right, in 2026 because they're comparing them to the great AI machine that never sleeps. I'm never going to say it doesn't make mistakes, but it doesn't sleep, so it can run all night. And they're translating a human to what a machine can do, and I think it's causing abuse there in the team. What are your thoughts about that?
Seeing that as well. The hard part for me is I know we're in the great transition and people are figuring out what's happening. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be lessons learned. Companies are already running into that quite a bit. So there's a little bit of wait and see. And then I'm giving a bit of grace because humans take time to learn. The pendulum's going to swing back the other way at some point, hopefully not too far. So you have to be adaptable. But that means if I'm the leader of the organization, I have to be adaptable. I have to be willing to let people make mistakes and learn from it. Right? That's one of my favorite things to say is you can't wait forever. Be a little wrong in the right direction and course correct along the way.
Yep.
Because some
Yep.
people, especially about technologists, when I started my career, it was perfect first time every time. That'll burn you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well.
you give yourself some grace, give grace for others, and we're all learning this together. One organization I'm working with, they've absolutely embraced AI adoption, and they actually created a kind of a social collection
Hmm.
in basically in a channel where people are sharing ideas, and the leadership is actually giving like bonuses and contests, and they're telling people to go learn, and then what they're doing is they're distilling down what someone brings up or what they're learning into bite-sized nuggets and keeping it very palatable. And then based on what people are coming back with on their own, they're coming up with a more formalized program for secure AI enablement.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, what does that have to do with security? Listen, we don't always have to be the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
one of those things is working all of that in, it keeps some of the fun in the job and a little bit of fun, a little bit of humor, some good people interaction with people you want to work with. You can come out of some really hard work and stressful times smiling.
Yeah. You might look a little crazy, but yeah, that's true.
It's part of the job.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, thanks so much, Brian. And so one thing that we end on every episode is we give the guests the opportunity to answer what's the one thing you wish the other side of the conversation understood. You can only do one thing and one target of the other side, whether that's the board, another CISO. So the question to you is, what's the one thing you wish the other side of the conversation understood?
The one thing that I wish everyone that wasn't in cybersecurity understood is that at the core, cybersecurity people, we're all about protecting people. And that's why we put the passion into it that we do. At the end of the day, we know we are protecting people.
Great. No, I 100% agree with that. Not losing sight of the why. I like that.
Hmm.
So, all right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Brian. And I can't wait to publish this and looking forward to seeing what the feedback is.
There you go. Thanks, Jason.